Most of your deepest wounds weren't carved by accidents or fate. They were etched by someone's silence when you needed their voice, someone's absence when you needed their presence. The pain that lingers the longest often comes from those who once said they'd never leave. And in that quiet betrayal, something inside you shifted. You stopped expecting, you started bracing, you learned, too young, too fast, that love doesn't always stay and loyalty isn't always mutual. But what if the problem isn't that people fail us? What if the problem is that we expect them not to? Today we're going to strip away the illusions about love, family, friendship, and face the truth no one prepares you for. The real peace doesn't come from finding someone who never lets you down. It comes from learning how to stand without needing anyone to hold you up. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear may just be the beginning of your emotional freedom. It's always the ones closest to us, isn't it? The ones we let in, the ones we believed would never hurt us. It's not the stranger on the street who leaves the deepest scars. It's the friend who stopped calling, the parent who never showed up, the partner who promised forever and meant only for now. That kind of pain doesn't just sting, it confuses you. It makes you question your worth, your judgment, your memories. Because how could someone who once saw your soul now look right through you? That's the kind of hurt that doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your understanding of connection. It's wild how the more you give, the more invisible you start to feel. You show up, support, sacrifice, and then wonder why it's not being returned. But that's the trap, expecting others to love like you do, to care like you do, to notice the effort you never asked credit for. Most people aren't out to hurt you, they're just out to protect themselves. It's not malice, it's instinct. Deep down, everyone is trying to get through life with as little pain as possible, and sometimes that means prioritizing their comfort over your feelings. It's not fair, but it's real. You might think someone's ignoring you or using you, but in their mind, they're just doing what they need to survive. And once you start to see that, really see it, you stop taking everything so personally. You realize that what felt like rejection was often just someone choosing themselves over you. And that's human. We don't say it out loud, but we all carry this quiet agreement in our heads. I was there for you, so you'll be there for me. It's unspoken, invisible, but it's there. And when the moment comes when we're the ones falling apart, we wait for the text, the call, the presence. And when it doesn't come, it feels like betrayal. But the truth is, they never signed that contract. We created it alone. We expected loyalty for our effort, but they never promised that. And that's where so much pain is born, from assuming that love automatically means reciprocity. Getting close to people is beautiful until it isn't. Because the more you open up, the more you risk being hurt. But pulling away, that brings its own kind of pain. Loneliness, isolation, feeling like no one truly sees you. It's a weird balancing act, wanting connection but fearing the cost of it. We long for warmth, for intimacy, but when we finally get close, our defenses spike. Just like two hedgehogs in the cold, we need each other, but we prick each other too. The real trick is finding that space where we can be near without bleeding. That's the hard part. It's not about giving up on people, it's about giving up the illusion. When you lower your expectations, not from bitterness, but from wisdom, something amazing happens. You reclaim your peace. You stop living in the space between what you hoped they'd do and what they actually did. That gap, that's where the hurt lives. Reducing your expectations isn't weakness, it's power. It means you're no longer handing your happiness over to someone else's decisions. You're no longer waiting to be saved. You become your own anchor. And that quiet self-reliance, it's not cold, it's freedom wrapped in clarity. We've been fed this story since childhood, the idea that happiness lives in the arms of others. That a perfect family, loyal friends, or a soulmate will complete us. So we chase that picture. We hold on to toxic ties, make excuses for pain, and stay far longer than we should, just to fit the narrative. But what no one tells you is that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones holding you back the most. Love isn't always safe. Family isn't always kind. And not every relationship is meant to be kept. Sometimes walking away is how you find yourself. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with who we think they are. That version we build in our minds, polished with hope and painted with all the things we wish they'd be. And when the real person doesn't match the version we created, we call it betrayal. But really, they never changed. We just refused to see them clearly. Idealizing someone is dangerous because it blinds us to the truth we don't want to accept. Loving someone shouldn't mean ignoring who they really are. It should mean choosing to see them fully, flaws and all, and deciding if that's enough. It's hard to admit, but sometimes the person who hurt you didn't break a promise. They just never made the one you imagined. We carry these silent fantasies about how people should behave, how they should love us, how they should show up. And when they don't, we call it betrayal. But what really breaks us is the story we built around them, the expectations, the assumptions, the unspoken hopes. Healing starts when you stop clinging to what should have been and start accepting what is. Because peace doesn't come from rewriting the past. It comes from releasing the illusion and facing reality with open eyes. People aren't heartless, they're just wired to protect their own interests first. It doesn't make them bad, it makes them human. We all operate from a place of survival, even in love. Someone may care about you deeply, but when it comes down to comfort or conflict, many will choose whatever keeps them safest. And the sooner you understand this, the less you'll take things personally. Because you've done it too. You've pulled away to protect yourself. You've chosen silence over confrontation. We all have. That's not cruelty, it's instinct. And when you stop expecting selflessness, you start seeing people as they truly are. You weren't born to be someone's emotional crutch, someone's fixer, or someone's constant yes. But somewhere along the way, you started wearing those roles like armor, trying to be the perfect child, the dependable friend, the loyal partner. And maybe it felt good for a while, being needed, being useful. But usefulness isn't the same as being seen. Eventually, the weight of performing becomes too heavy to carry. You lose yourself in who you thought you had to be. The truth is, you don't owe anyone a version of yourself that costs you your peace. You're allowed to just be you. No titles, no roles, just real. There's a kind of strength that doesn't come from holding on. It comes from letting go, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Renouncing what you were taught to need, constant validation, endless connection, approval from people who don't even understand you. That's where real power begins. We're conditioned to believe that needing others is human. And yes, connection matters. But dependence? That's something else. When you stop reaching just to feel complete, when you stop filling every silence with someone else's noise, you start hearing your own voice. And in that quiet, you realize you were never broken. You were just buried under false needs. Your emotions are like currency, limited, valuable, and easily spent on the wrong people. Think about how often you give your time, your energy, your care to those who wouldn't do the same for you. Not out of malice, but because you haven't paused to ask, is this a good investment? No one teaches us to protect our emotional resources. We pour ourselves into one-sided relationships, hoping love will balance the scales, but love without return isn't generosity, it's self-neglect. Start noticing where your energy flows. If it's always going out and never coming back, it's time to pull back and reinvest in you. Sometimes the hardest thing to walk away from isn't the person, it's the guilt. You tell yourself, they were there when I needed them. I owe them. But love isn't a transaction. It's not a loan you pay back with silence, sacrifice, or self-abandonment. If someone helped you, be grateful. But that gratitude shouldn't become a prison. You don't have to stay in situations that no longer serve you just because they once did. True love never demands repayment. If it comes with strings, it wasn't love, it was leverage. And you deserve relationships that free you, not ones that hold you hostage. It's a strange kind of loneliness, being surrounded by people and still feeling alone. That's what happens in one-sided connections. You're the one reaching out, checking in, holding it all together. And deep down, you know it. You feel the imbalance every time your phone stays quiet when you're the one who needs support. But you tell yourself stories. They're just busy. They mean well, because admitting the truth would hurt. Still, the truth is kinder than false hope. If you're always the giver and never the receiver, it's not a relationship, it's emotional labor. And you're allowed to stop carrying what isn't shared. There comes a moment when you have to ask yourself, am I staying because I'm happy or because I'm afraid of what comes next? Letting go isn't easy, especially when your identity has been wrapped up in being the dependable one, the strong one, the one who always shows up. But being needed isn't the same as being loved. And sometimes holding on is just a quiet way of avoiding yourself. When you finally choose to release what's weighing you down, be it a relationship, a role, or a version of yourself that no longer fits, you don't just lose something, you make space to grow. Something changes the moment you stop chasing connection out of fear. When you no longer need someone to fill your emptiness, you begin to attract people from a place of wholeness, not desperation. That's when the right ones find you, not because you begged, convinced, or clung, but because your presence speaks for itself. You no longer tolerate what drains you. You no longer confuse attention with affection. And yes, some people will drift away when you stop bending to be accepted. Let them. Because the ones who remain, those are the ones who love you as you are, not for what you do for them. You don't owe your peace to anyone else's approval. It doesn't depend on who stayed, who noticed, or who said they were proud. Real peace isn't loud. It's the quiet confidence that lives inside you when you stop needing the outside world to validate your worth. It's waking up and knowing that even if no one texts, even if no one claps, even if no one sees, you are still enough. Inner peace isn't about having perfect relationships or constant support. It's about building a life where your sense of self doesn't crumble when others pull away. It's your foundation, not theirs. Real peace isn't dramatic. It doesn't make headlines in your life. It's not the passionate reunion, the tear-filled apology, or the grand gesture. It's the calm that settles in when you no longer crave chaos to feel alive. For a lot of us, that calm feels unfamiliar, almost scary, because we were raised on emotional storms. We mistake stillness for emptiness, stability for boredom. But the truth is, peace isn't supposed to thrill you, it's supposed to steady you. It's the quiet moment where you can finally exhale, no performance, no panic. And once you taste it, You'll never trade it for turbulence again. There's a kind of silence that isn't lonely, it's sacred. It's the moment when no one's texting, no one's calling, and yet you feel whole. We've been taught to fear that silence, to fill it with noise, with people, with distractions, but that's not peace. That's avoidance. Emotional silence is where you meet the real you, the version that isn't performing, proving, or pleasing. It's where your nervous system finally unclenches and your thoughts start making sense. That quiet space, that's home. And until you learn to sit in it without panic, every relationship will feel like a rescue mission instead of a choice. There's a battle happening inside you that no one sees, and most days you barely talk about it. It's the quiet pressure to be more, do more, prove more. You compare yourself to people who aren't even living your story and punish yourself for not measuring up to an invisible standard. And the worst part? You don't even know where that standard came from. Maybe it was a parent's voice, a culture's expectation, or your own perfectionism whispering you're not enough. But here's the truth. Peace doesn't come from winning that war. It comes from stepping away from it entirely and choosing yourself as you are. There's a quiet part of you that just wants someone to say, "I see you. You did good. You matter." And when you don't hear it, doubt creeps in. That's the thing about recognition. It feels harmless, even healthy, but when you start relying on it to feel worthy, it becomes a trap. You perform for praise, you shape your life around applause, and when the clapping stops, so does your confidence. It's easy to forget that your value doesn't increase because someone else approves. You were already enough. The real work is learning to believe that, even when the room is silent. There's a moment in life, quiet and subtle, when you realize you're okay without anyone cheering you on. Not because you've become numb or jaded, but because you've finally made peace with yourself. That's emotional maturity. It's not about perfect relationships or never feeling lonely. It's about knowing your worth even when no one's affirming it. It's the shift from needing others to reflect your value, to recognizing it in your own stillness. You stop chasing connection to feel whole. You begin offering it without losing yourself. And suddenly love becomes a gift, not a requirement. You stop surviving people and start simply being you. You don't need to be everything for everyone to be enough for yourself. Let go of who you thought you had to be and come home to who you really are. If this spoke to something inside you, there's more waiting. Watch the next video on your screen. And thank you for being a part of Mosaic Mind.